Hello. We've got a brand new Ozeki with a brand new name. Who might be next? Sothro!
Roll the salt, get in the ring. Welcome to the Dohyo!
Hello and welcome to the Dohyo here on MrJWags channel. We are halfway through the sumo calendar. We have just done an update of our Charts of My Tiers sumo ranking, so check that one out if you haven't. But this episode we are updating our who will be our next Ozeki rankings. Now things have been very fascinating on the Ozeki front, much busier than normal. Of course, as we all know, Kiribayama, now Kirishima, has been promoted since the last tournament, and we are updating our next Ozeki rankings. There has been a lot of changes to these rankings since we last did them in December, pre-January Basho-ish. But of course, I must warn you that the recency bias is always going to be a large factor in these rankings. We only do them every 6 months or so, so whoever is very recently doing well is probably going to be a little bit higher ranked than people who were doing well a few tournaments ago. Case in point, Takayasu, who was just coming off 2 consecutive Juryo, did very well in the last rankings, while Daisho, who, spoiler alert, does very well on these rankings, had 3 consecutive Make Koshi going into the last ranking, so he wasn't even on the list. So take that with a grain of salt, but let's dive into these rankings. First off the list, our former number 5, Kiribayama, because of course he's been promoted to Ozeki. Amazing work, Kiribayama. Now, Kirishima, gotta get used to that. Kirishima, of course, is an example of a wrestler who did very, very well in his youthful phase, but now is right in his peak, appears to have really gotten a hold of his sumo, and I cannot wait to see what happens in his near future. Also off the list, Takayasu. As I just mentioned, recency bias had a great deal of his last ranking. Had a very interesting year last year, full of Kyujo and also Juryo. It was either one or the other. Well, this year he has 2 Kyujos and 1 10 and 5. That tells me why he may still be in Yusho contention. He's going to take a little tumble down the Bansake, so I would expect him to do a little bit better if healthy next tournament, but I do not think his body is going to allow him to get 3 double-digit wins in the Sanyaku altogether. Also off the list, Abi. Now, again, speaking of recency bias, Abi had just won a tournament at this point last year, so we didn't really expect Abi to do that well, and Abi has since sort of returned to form now that he is back up in the Joy Sanyaku region. His ceiling seems to be about 7 to 9 wins right up here in the Komusubi High Maegashira line. He's still young enough, there still could be a leap in his sumo, but right now, it seems like he's going to stay where he is. The second he gets double-digit wins on the Sanyaku, I would be very happy to put him back on the list. And our final wrestler off the list, Wakataka Kage. Ooh, yes. Of course, Wakataka Kage got an injury a couple tournaments ago. We're not going to see him probably for the rest of the year. Hopefully he will return full strength and come back to Sanyaku in the medium to late future. And of course, if any of you are wondering, how does one become an Ozeki? Well, we got you covered. We have an amazing video we have just done, so check that out. It explores all about recent Ozeki runs and what is required of wrestlers. It may not be what you think or what you have been told online. I mean, I'm online, but you can totally trust me. Now, those of you who've seen these rankings before know that these rankings are for 9 Basho in the future. So we are looking to the end of 2024. Who is the most likely wrestler to make Ozeki? We're going to start with a couple honorable mentions of 2 former Ozeki, Takeyumi and Shodai. Now, Takeyumi and Shodai are recent Ozeki who have since been demoted in the past year. Now, both of these guys are in their 30s. They are past their peak, but the Bansake is still a little bit softer than it was back when these guys were, in fact, in their peak fighting their best. So I still think there is a small chance that Shodai or Takeyumi could get back up into the Sanyaku. I just don't think that they are going to have a 32-33 wins in the Sanyaku left in them. But I could still see one more good charge out of one. Probably not both, but maybe out of one of them. If we just look at what they've done this year, not too great. They've both had one winning record each, and they both are going to be Maegashira 2 in the next tournament. So if this tournament we do see double-digit wins out of Matakayumi or Shodai, perhaps next rankings they will be back on. But number 8 on the list, Kinbozan. Now Kinbozan, the Kazakh phenom who just turned 26, is up in Makuuchi. He hit his very first ceiling, I think, in the last tournament. Got a 4 and 11, is going to get bumped down the Banzake a bit. But I am not too worried about him. I think he still has a lot of technique. And of course, most wrestlers, once they hit the joy for the first time, tend to take a few hits and bump back down. I am not worried long-term on Kinbozan and still expect to see him in Sanyaku probably by the end of the year. But since he is coming off of a Make Koshi, he has downward movement on the Banzake, not the upward movement we are looking for. So that's what places him down here at 8. I still think 9 Basho from now he could be an Ozeki, but he's below a few people. Number 7, Hokuseiho. Now, of course, Hokuseiho is the giant 6'8", over 200 centimeters wrestler out of the Miyagino stable. If you haven't seen him on the ring, it's because you're not looking. The guy is very, very hard to miss. He is 2 tournaments into his Makuuchi career, which is, of course, a little early, but so was Kinbozan. But unlike Kinbozan, he's not 26, he is 21, giving him so much more time for a possible leap. Now, he's gotten 2 Kachikoshi, a 9 and then an 8. These are not Ozeki numbers yet, but there's still so much time for a leap. Once he gains a bit more experience against the top rankers, and once he develops sort of a plan B and a plan C other than, I'm huge, I think we're going to see a lot of upward movement on the Banzake from him. Now for the upcoming tournament, he's going to be up at Maegashira 6, so right below the joy mark, so I don't think he's going to face a lot of Sanyaku unless he has another amazing first week like he did last tournament. But of course, he's going to need to hold up in that second week too. And number 6, you're going to probably see a theme with these bottom 3 on the rankings. Ochiai, or the new Hakuoho, also from the Miyagino stable. Yeah, Hakuoho may not be wrestling anymore, but he has some amazing recruits coming through the pipeline right now. Now, Hakuoho, the former Ochiai, is only on his 4th tournament ever in professional sumo. He started Makushita Sukedashi, got bumped up to Juryo, only spent 2 tournaments in Juryo, bumped up. He had a 14 and 1 last time. He's now at Maegashira 17. What's he going to do down there? I'm expecting great things, probably not like a Yusho right off the bat, but I would not be surprised if he gets double-digit wins. I think it is very possible he makes Sanyaku by the end of the year, and once he makes Sanyaku, that's when we can really start looking at possible Ozeki runs. Now, of course, like Kinbozan, I imagine we are going to hit some sort of ceiling with Hakuoho. I mean, if we don't, that would be utterly amazing. I think we're going to, but I still think he's going to have enough time to make a credible Ozeki run by the end of next year. Moving up on the rankings, number 5, Kotonowaka. Now, as I mentioned in the Charts of My Tears episode we just dropped, it's not that I think that Kotonowaka is getting worse, it's just I think that the Banzake around him has gotten a little bit better, and he has now been passed by a few rikishi up in the Sekiwake region. He only has 17 wins in his last 2 tournaments, so it would take pretty much a Zen show to get him any Ozeki promotion talk this tournament. So I don't think it's going to happen this tournament. I still think there is a leap there to be had for Kotonowaka. He's only had his best tournament ever in Makuuchi has 11 wins, and his best up in the Sanyaku is only 9 wins. I think we are going to need to see a definite leap in talent before we can start saying that guy's an Ozeki, let alone that guy is a Yusho contender. I think he's close, but I don't see it happening for the rest of the year. The beginning of next year, however, is a very different story. There is quite a jump in the rankings from the likelihood of number 6 becoming an Ozeki and the likelihood of number 5. I have very good feelings about Kotonowaka in 2024. Number 4 on the rankings, former Ozeki and former champion Asanoyama. Asanoyama's back in Makuuchi. He came out of suspension looking amazing, ended up winning a Juryo Yusho, took the Jun-Yusho from Maegashira, I think 14 in the last tournament. So he's looking pretty much like Prime Asanoyama. Remember, Prime Asanoyama never had more than 12 wins in a Makuuchi tournament. He's up at Maegashira 4 this tournament, which is, if you looked at the what does it take to be an Ozeki video, is sort of the borderline it would take to launch an Ozeki run. So if he keeps getting 12 wins from here on out, he could be an Ozeki 3 tournaments from now. I would, in fact, be a little shocked if Asanoyama got a non-injury Makekoshi for the rest of the year. I see him as better than where he is right now. Even though he's at Maegashira 4, he's up in the Joy. Let's see how he does. He's probably a little rusty. Probably has not faced a bunch of the young hotness that is currently up in the Sanyaku. But I do think Asanoyama's natural talent level and his veteran guile will easily keep him around the 10-win mark. And if we look back to Asanoyama's, I want to say first Ozeki run, he doesn't have a second one yet, but if we look back to the Ozeki run, he never got to the 33/3. He ended up getting like 10 or 11 for 4 tournaments in a row, and they're like, he's great, put him in there. So I think he could easily do something like that again, maybe looking around March next year. Okay, if you follow sumo, you can probably figure out who's up here in the top 3. It's the 3 Sekiwake. It's the 3 people who might actually be an Ozeki by the end of the next tournament. The question is, what order do we put them in? I was tempted to just make it like, 3-way tie, but that's the easy way out. We have to figure out who is actually more likely to make this happen. Of course, we are talking about Sekiwake, Wakamotoharu, Hoshoryu, and Daisho. Now, me being the chart-based stat nerd that I am, I made a chart. I plotted all 3 of these Sekiwake against the people who are going to be in the Sanyaku for the next tournament, their one-loss records, and see who has the best percentage record. Of course, they don't have an equivalent number of matches because they all got to the top at different times. And this was surprising to me, you'll see that Hoshoryu has a much better winning percentage against the people who will be in the Sanyaku. He, in fact, has winning records against every single member of the Sanyaku that he might face, except for Terunofuji and Takakeisho. In fact, all 3 Sekiwake have losing records against Takakeisho and Terunofuji. And in double fact, 2 of the Sekiwake have never beat Terunofuji. So I think the X factor for these guys making Ozeki in the next tournament will in fact be, are Takakeisho and Terunofuji healthy and in full fighting form? Because if they are, it's going to be a lot tougher for these guys to get that Ozeki belt. Fish. So, it was hard, but number 3 on the next Ozeki rankings, Wakamotoharu. I know, it seems like I'm always underestimating him, but the stats are all pointing in one direction on this. Now, he's 29. He wasn't even on the rankings last time because he had never made Sanyaku yet. And of course, the last 3 tournaments he's been up in the Sanyaku getting Kachikoshi. Usually double digits. He has 21 wins over the last 2 tournaments, including a Gino-Sho, and no fusen wins, unlike the other 2 wrestlers who are ahead of him. The question I have, he needs 12 wins to get up to the 33, which, as I've shown, is not necessarily a thing you need to do, but it does help. And he's never gotten 12 wins in Makuuchi. In fact, if you look through his Makuuchi career, he's had 9 Basho up here, and 7 of them, 7 out of 9, have been 9 or 10 wins. His best record in Makuuchi is an 11-4, so he'd need to do better than his best ever record to make Ozeki. So, does the oldest Sekiwake with the worst win percentage against the rest of the Sanyaku have a chance? I think he absolutely does. He's still improving despite his, advanced age. So, we get down to our final 2, and the question I had to ask myself is, are these rankings about who is most likely to become an Ozeki first, or who is most likely percentage-wise to become an Ozeki overall over the next 9 tournaments? Because I think you get a different answer for each one of them. If the question is who is most likely to become an Ozeki after the very next tournament, my answer is number 2, Daisho. 29-year-old Daisho, of course, has had one of the best streaks of his professional career in the last 3 tournaments. Like I mentioned before, recency bias. He came off of 3 straight Makekoshi to end last year, 3 straight Kachikoshi to begin this year, and has been looking amazing. He has 22 wins over the last 2 tournaments, one of them a fusen. We'll see if they care about that. He also has a Jun Yusho playoff loss to Kiribayama, now Kirishima. And his best ever tournament was a 13-2 Yusho a couple years ago. So it looks like he's still within his peak. He's doing incredibly well. He's been very consistent. He has the ability to get the number of wins that he's going to need for the next tournament. He'll need 11 to get up to 33. And on top of that, he's the only one of the Sekiwake to regularly beat Terunofuji. He doesn't have a winning record, but he still has beaten him multiple times, which is way more than the other 2 have done. Now, his winning percentage against the Sanyaku, not the best, not the worst, but not the best. And that is due primarily to 17 losses to Takakeisho. As I said before, Takakeisho's health was going to affect the Ozeki chances of each one of these people a lot. And the last reason I'm putting him second on the list is the fact that he is an Oshi, a push thrust specialist. Now, it's not that I think that pusher thrusters are somehow worse or it's a not as good form of sumo. I do happen to think that pushing thrusting is a less consistent form of sumo. If you look past through our recent Ozeki and Yokozuna, you will see that most of them tend to be yotsu, or belt wrestlers. So, when you have a guy who's a pusher thruster, when he's on his game, obviously a guy like Daisho can get a 13-2. A guy like Abe can get a 12-3 and get a championship. But when you look at the alpha dogs throughout history, with the exception of maybe Akebono, I can't really think of an alpha dog in sumo who was primarily almost 100% coming at you with the pusher thruster attack. But of course, this is a trend. This isn't a hard and fast rule. Look at Takakesho. He is a pusher thruster. He's been up at Ozeki for years. So, if I had to bet on one wrestler making Ozeki out of this three for the next tournament, it would be Daisho. But if you ask me which one of the three I thought had the best chance of a Make Koshi, I'd also say Daisho. Alright, and that brings us to our number one. You can probably guess. Hoshoryu, number one for the second time in a row. So obviously last time I wasn't as correct, I guess. Now the number one reason he's got number one in the sumo rankings, I don't see a sumo future where this wrestler who has done so well at such a young age, he just turned 24. I don't see this wrestler making it 9 more basho in the sanyaku and then suddenly tumbling on out, barring injury. I don't see him tumbling out of the sanyaku and not working his way up. His growth has been steady, and I think the flaws in his game are all fixable. I think they are all mental, and they're things he is in fact working on. I still expect him to win his first Basho this year, even if it wasn't in May or March like I predicted before. And getting down to the nuts and bolts of it, he has 21 wins in the last 2 tournaments, 2 fusen wins. We will see how much that affects it. But if he gets up to 12 wins, that's 33. And he's also had 8 consecutive kachikoshi in the sanyaku, which is incredibly hard to do. Remember when I was talking about Asanoyama not necessarily getting up to 12 to get the Ozeki run? Perhaps this could be a path for Hoshoryu in the future. Because, of course, the best record Hoshoryu's ever gotten is an 11-4. But of the wrestlers we have, I think he's the one most likely to take a leap up into sumo dominance. And, going back to the chart, he has by far the best record of the 3 of them. So he's got the youth, he's got the consistency, he's got the technique. Hoshoryu Daisho, it's a virtual tie. But if I had to pick one wrestler who I was going to put money on to be Ozeki 9 basho from now, it's going to be Hoshoryu. And of course, the best part about these rankings, they are all very subjective. So please hit me up in the comments. Let me know what you think. Where did I put your favorites? And how wrong am I? Thanks so much for joining us here on the Dohyo. Please remember to like and subscribe if you have not already. Liking and subscribing just tells the YouTube algorithm that more people want to see the Dohyo, so spread the Dohyo love to all the corners of the interwebs where they can get caught by the webs and people can see them, as is my understanding. Stay tuned. Next week, we're going to have our bolder predictions for the July Basho, and you're not going to want to miss those. So everyone, stay safe, stay strong, stay healthy, and I'll see you next time on the Dohyo.